Hello and welcome to this Fireside Chat with Toby Coffey from London's National Theatre, which is taking part as part of the CPH Lab. Now, the CPH Lab is an initiative from CPH Docs, where we bring together creative technologists and storytellers to develop new forms of expression in documentary. And this year, because of the obvious situation, we've done things a little bit differently. And so the lab's been taking place online, and we've got 6 projects that we've been working intensively with to develop stories that we aim to show together as a collection under the banner of Protopia during CPH Docs, which is now taking place from the 21st of April to the 2nd of May this year. So today we've been catching up with all of the projects, talking about how they're going to be exhibiting their work. And so then I thought it would be great to bring Toby along at this juncture, because he works at a live venue. So I think that whenever he thinks about developing work, he's always got audiences in mind. And so today we've been talking to all the participants about how we're actually going to bring this to an audience. So I hope that Toby's talk will help them think more deeply about this. Now, I first met Toby when I was working for the Sheffield Doc Fest, and he used to come along to a lot of our events, and I thought it was interesting that someone from the world of theatre was coming to a documentary film event, essentially. But then I got to know him and realised that actually in the world of kind of immersive storytelling, we weren't so terribly far apart at all. In fact, we're probably going closer and closer. And he's been extremely helpful with the CPH Lab through different iterations of the lab, with the participants helping bring the work to broader audiences, advising them on that. He, a few years ago, set up the Immersive Storytelling Studio at the National Theatre, which is a space to develop new projects that should enhance, I suppose, the National Theatre's remit for developing interesting ways of storytelling and engaging audiences in new ways. So is that more or less right, Toby?
That sounds perfectly right, yes.
Good. So would you like to, I think Toby's going to talk for about half an hour, and then we'll get questions from the lab participants who are all with us in this room, and from anybody who's watching along on Facebook Live as well. Just put the questions into the chat. Thank you very much. So take it away, Toby.
Great, thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me, and thank you to CPH Docs for having me as well. It's great to be back. What I wanted to do with this presentation is, well, not presentation, with this fireside chat is, when I go to conferences or listen to seminars, quite often what happens is it's a bit of the behind the scenes that comes out that is the part that I find most interesting, and not necessarily the thing that the person is selling or talking about, but more how that particular person sees the world and how they categorize the world and respond to things. That, as a more general thing, is the thing that I most often found very interesting. And that's what I would like to try and do here. Is less be talking specifically about projects, but actually talk about my own perspectives around things and actually the learnings that we've taken from the projects. And just to let you know where my kind of mind sits on the evolution of the form of immersive, and it's easier in a way just to talk about that for VR first of all. For me, immersive is a whole new genre coming into land, in the same way that radio, TV, games all came in and landed and have developed their own ecosystem over a period of time. And what has also happened with each of those things is there have been notable interventions whereby the required technology, if you like, has been put in front of audiences. So, for example, with radio, the Bush, who are the radio manufacturing company, they actually sponsored local radio stations in America to broadcast, so that there was a need for the product. You know, the reason the games industry is the multi-billion-pound industry that it is today is in a big part due to the games arcades in the 80s, which was, you know, again, putting, well, in a way that was very much putting the technology in front of potential audiences to build the audience base way before it became prolific in the home market. And I think that is where the point that we're at with immersive at the moment, and particularly with VR. I personally think 2020 would have been quite a significant year for location-based entertainment venues, where we are starting to put the required technologies and infrastructures in place for people to get access to that type of work. So for me, it's immersive is new in itself, but bringing a whole new discipline to an audience isn't. And we should not forget that and recognise that as humanity and technology have been down a similar path before. And also, you know, really interesting when you look at mobile, for example, 2006 was originally quoted as the year of the mobile, but it wasn't. The figures that were quoted in 2006 weren't actually achieved until a decade later, which is 2016, in terms of the mass adoption of how many people had proper smartphones. So you need to take all these things into context, and as how you look at the world around us and the world that we're operating in. So I'm going to go over to some slides now, and I'll talk for a period of time and then kind of conclude with, I guess, a provocation, which is, you know, what are we looking for next? And please feel free to line up questions for us to talk about. So yes, this is the National Theatre on the South Bank in London. And as Mark said, in 2016 we set up the Immersive Storytelling Studio. And Rufus Norris, who's the artistic director of the National Theatre, he, when he joined, which was 2015, he was actually reading the book Creativity Inc. at the time, which is the story of Pixar. And he said, if you read about the development of Pixar, there's technology behind it, but it's when you bring the storytellers in that you end up with genius and really compelling work. And that's very much our perspective in terms of what we believe is our role in this kind of immersive field and where we can take it. So what is the studio? It's an environment where storytellers and creative technologists come together to develop new forms of narrative, performance and audience experience through the use of emerging technologies. I cringe slightly at this next slide in terms of referring to lead roles and ensemble casts, but effectively what it is saying is we're a place where the story and the audience experience come first, and everything else, the technology, comes second. And actually, there's a huge list of technology, you know, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, projection mapping, holodecks, etc., etc. Also, I think one of the things to be aware of is when we say virtual reality, if you Google virtual reality, what you were presented with, Google Images, what you're presented with is a whole load of images of VR headsets. The headset is not virtual reality. The headset is the 2020, 2021 way of accessing virtual reality, and how people actually access virtual reality is going to continue to change over time. Doesn't mean that we're going to lose headsets, but we've got to get out of thinking that that headset is VR. That headset is how we currently look at VR. This slide actually I did in 2016. It's interesting that it still stands as to what we do as a studio. We make work that is supposed to be live, so audience to performer. We make production related work, so work that sits alongside the repertoire of shows at the National Theatre. And also we create tourable and distributable work. So that is work that is intended to go out of the venue, and either whether it's to other venues or whether it's to be on platforms. That's the intent for that strand of work. And then we have something which I call the discussion with the stages, which is how we work with immersive to inform what a staged piece of work looks like on one of our 3 traditional stages. And what I would like to do is just kind of quickly go through some, well, the 5 main public-facing projects that we've had, and just explain them briefly, and then explain some of the learnings that have come out of that. The session's not long enough to go into it in depth, but just some key themes that I would hope you guys find useful. So in 2015, there was a show called Wonderland was conceived, which was by Damon Albarn, Moira Buffini and Rufus Norris. And it was a musical version of Alice in Wonderland set for the digital age, in which Alice is actually an avatar of a girl in high school called Ali. The rabbit hole is the internet, and Wonderland is wonder.land, which is this kind of virtual space. And what you can see on the screen here is this is Che the Cheshire Cat, who exists in a very trippy Wonderland environment. And we did 2 things. First of all, we created a piece of VR, which was the audience experiences that you fall down the rabbit hole. Wonderland starts to light up around you. It's very dark at first, and then you are serenaded by Che the Cheshire Cat from one of the songs from Wonder.land. In effect, you could say it's a VR music video. Because it's always good, people find it handy to have things to compare things to get a sense of what it is. We went through a decision-making process about the form of what it should be. And there were discussions that should this be a game, or should this take a scene from the show? And actually, I felt that we were very new to this. We're not game developers, so what game we would make would be restricted by the experience and finance that we had to make something. All of a sudden, doing narrative that was conceived to work on stage and thinking that that's going to translate directly into VR didn't feel like that was necessarily the case. And also, we've got great content and form as it is in the shape of the music. So whereas, people were in discussion that, you could do like a 1 hour long game, or you could take this scene and you can give agency potentially to an audience to choose which character in the scene they look at. That all felt too complex and not quite right for the first thing that we did. And actually creating kind of euphoric, ephemeral 4-minute music video in VR felt exactly the right thing for us to do for this. And not over-challenge ourselves and not become the victim of the want to be something else, as it were. So we made that VR experience, and we also created a larger installation called Enter Wonder.land, but one of the features of that was how you actually experienced Fabulous Wonder.land, which is the name of the VR piece. And in the show, what happened is Ali, who is getting bullied at school, goes into Wonder.land on a phone, but she goes into the school toilet to hide away from everybody else to go into Wonder.land. So what we did is we recreated the school toilets front of house at the National Theatre. So you went, in order for you to get into Wonder.land, you needed to sit on the toilet in the story that Ali did in the show. And we had over 90,000 people experience the VR in a 5-month period. But what's very kind of important about this is that the staging of the immersive is a key component of that immersive experience. And it can be quite often that we get very focused on the actual technical component of what the storytelling is, but actually if there's a presentation world around it, that can really benefit the overall storytelling. So in terms of learnings for me, the thing that was really important for Wonder.land was to find the right form rather than let's be the most this or the most that or the most other, and that the staging of the content can be as important as the content itself. The next project that we did was a piece called Homer Mia, which is a cinematic virtual reality documentary in which it came about because our artistic director, Rufus Norris, had been volunteering in the Calais jungle over Christmas 2015 into 16. And he came back and said to me, Toby, that's where you need to get a 360 camera crew, because traditional film photography just can't do it justice in terms of what the experience was. But he felt that 360 film could. And this was very interesting for me because I thought it was a great opportunity to document something that was very much live at that point in time, but also the new artistic director of the National Theatre is coming back with ideas about where this form of storytelling can go. So that in itself is very interesting. And we very quickly got out to the Calais jungle, but well, I say we, I didn't go. We sent a camera crew who'd had some experience of working in the jungle before, and started to record what was there. And we didn't know the exact form of what it was going to be. The lead that we had from Rufus is that we want this to be through the eyes of the person in the Calais jungle. So we very much weren't going over to interview people or, you know, to have people a kind of character in scene. It was like, you are the person in the jungle. And so we went over and we filmed over a long period of time, and we also, I say a long period of time, over a number of weeks, the filmmakers were making relationships with people in the camp. And what transpired is that we made the film into Homer Mia, which is the story of a 22-year-old Sudanese refugee who finds himself in the Calais jungle. And the Surround Vision are the guys who we made the film with, and who are a really great company. And the interesting thing, we all went on a learning curve, I think is the thing to say. So actually, the guys were so enthusiastic about getting the first assembly of the film. They almost got it done before we even had time to contemplate what it should actually look like. And it was very interesting because it was, in a way, a natural assumption of this is what a film like that should look like. And it was actually a 6-minute 360 film with about maybe 40, 50 different shots in it. And it read very well, almost like this is the time that was documented in the Calais jungle. But there were a number of problems in that for me. One is it was 6 minutes long, which, because everybody at that time said 360 film has to be 6 or 7 minutes long, and it was just like this urban myth that had come around that had some substance in it, because it was like, how long can people have VR headsets on for, etc., etc., etc. But actually, it was something that we needed to break through. And the other side for me is that it didn't feel like a really strong piece of dramatic storytelling, which is, for us as the National Theatre working in VR, what we need to be doing. So what we actually did was, so we need to strip this down and actually let's treat it like a radio play before we have the immersion of the film and get the story right first of all, which we did. And now Homer Mia is a 13-minute film with probably 14 shots in it, and an intentional period of darkness as well. So it sits quite separately from what people were used to as 360 films at that time, but it is most definitely a piece of dramatic storytelling. And also in terms of the form for it, which is one of the learnings for me, the form is actually, in a way, the audio sits separately from the visuals. So Amir, you hear his voiceover, he tells you his story whilst you see the camp in effect through his eyes, but the audio and the video aren't tied together, they're not synced. And what that allows you to do is it's a slightly more meditative approach to hearing or seeing the place that you're being put in, because you're not actually following a story with your eyes. You're absorbing an experience through your eyes, and you're listening to his story through the audio. So the Don't Believe the Hype bit was like, 360 film does not need to be 6 or 7 minutes long. It didn't need to be then, and obviously doesn't now. Story first was the bit that helped us get into making it a really strong piece of work that it is, and finding the right form, so that seeing it through the refugee's eyes, but actually it being a bit more of a meditative thing, allows somehow it to sink in and make it a stronger delivery of a message. Also along the way, a number of people have said 360 is dead in terms of VR and immersive storytelling, and I don't believe that either. And we still are developing work for 360 alongside work for mixed reality, remotely distanced audience pieces. So again, be really careful about those industry noises. A lot of time it's just hype rather than actual something that you should be relying on. So the next public-facing project that we had was Draw Me Close, which I'll give a little bit more insight into what the experience here is, because it's a little more complex to describe. It was a collaboration with the National Film Board of Canada, and Jordan Tannehill, who is the writer-director, conceived of a piece in which you would become Jordan, and it was about the relationship between him and his mother. And what happens is when an audience member comes into the venue, they're taken to a quiet space. You take off your shoes, and then you're taken into the performance space. Now you can't see any of the staging at this point, but what happens is we put the headset on you, and you are then presented with a white canvas, if you like. And then what happens is the world starts to be illustrated, to be drawn around you. And you find that you are on the garden path of Jordan's childhood home. And Jordan starts to narrate to you. And at this point in time, what he's effectively doing is allowing you to understand that you are now 5-year-old Jordan. He says, this is the place that I lived in when I grew up. This is where Mum was diagnosed, because the central part of the piece is the fact that his mother has been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and you can start to feel the story in the experience, if that makes sense. And what happens is you then find yourself right in front of the front door, and Jordan says, "Come on, let's go in." And what happens is, as you reach out, you can see there's a door handle on the door, although ironically, for some reason, it's come out with that picture. But when you reach out to it, there is actually physically a door handle there. And when you turn that handle and open the door, the illustrated door opens, and you can see into the living room. And you walk into the living room, and you can walk around. You feel the pile of the carpet under your feet, which is a very important kind of sensorial intervention, maybe. I don't know. It's just a very important part of it that you kind of subconsciously acknowledge, but it's playing a really important role. And you can walk around the space, you can see into other rooms, etc., etc. And then what happens is Mum comes home from work, and Mum exists in the performance space with you because they're in that space with you. Sorry, Mum exists in the illustrated world because there is a performer, a live performer in the space with you who has a motion capture suit on. And in effect, she's puppeteering, the actress is puppeteering the shape, the visual form of the mother in VR. And Mum comes and does what any mum would do when they come in, this is a 5-year-old child, is she comes in and gives you a hug. And what happens is the audience member sees the illustrated mum coming in for a hug, and then actually physically feels the hug. And that's the point, that's what I call the holy shit moment, because you can really see it in the body language and sometimes the noises that the audience member makes, because they're like, wow, that's what this is. I am actually living in an illustrated world. And then she says, after she's giving you a hug, she's like, God, Jordan, your feet stink. Go and open the window. And so you walk over. Oh, this is behind the scenes of the hug, as it were. And then she says, Jordan, your feet stink. Go and open the window. And you look over, and there is a sash window, an illustrated sash window. As you walk over in real space, and you put your hand out, there is a physical sash window there. And as you open the window, the soundscape changes because you can hear outside coming in. And some people put their head out of the window and they talk about being able to feel a breeze, which is very interesting because there is no breeze. But what we're learning here is that people's brains are starting to fill in the gaps of what they expect to be there. And then you, excuse me, you spend an evening with mum, and there's drawing, singing, and then mum takes you to bed. And the space that you're in, the living room is erased in a way, and then the bedroom is drawn in, so it's much like a traditional set change in a theatre. And then mum leads you over and she tucks you into bed. So this is when we're in tech development, as was the previous slide, sorry, and this is Tamsin, the actress, tucking the audience member into bed. And this for me is just a joyous photograph, one of my favourites, because we saw that reaction all the time. And actually it came to be a slightly, the tucking into bed, it became slightly bittersweet for some people, but I'll explain that shortly. But the joy of being tucked into bed was more than evident for a lot of people. And that's where the first chapter ended. We showed this at Tribeca, and then iterated the project on to what would be, that was then a 6-minute experience, but we iterated that out to become what would be a 1-hour that we showed at the Young Vic in February 2019. Yes, sorry, I'm getting confused with the years. So I'm just going to play you a couple of quick trailers. Actually, I might just play one because I'm quite conscious of time. And if I change my share screen settings. Oh, sorry, wrong window. So this will just give you a bit of a sense of the illustrated world.
You were already at the front door when I arrived, like a little dog barking, telling me about your day. I watched you, lost in your own world. I wanted to save you from all the suffering. Looking at you, I thought, why can't it always be this?
And I will now just share back to the slides. Okay, and I'm going to miss out a video and a couple of slides as well, just because we want to leave enough time for conversation. But to talk about the learnings on this, you know, the real strong thing on this was a reminder that we're always empowering the artist. They take the lead. They are the people that are going to push the boundaries on this, and come up with the ideas that producers or technologists aren't necessarily going to do. And so again, it was a very strong reminder in finding the right form, and it's a form that we didn't expect coming at that point in time. I've put the importance of carpet. You know, it's this, I think as a group of technologists would not have seen that coming, but it's the again, the artist seeing the importance of all the different senses and how they come together. So it's not just the VR in its in isolation, or the it's the kind of, it's the small things around the edge also help actually accumulate into what is a strong piece of storytelling. And then what we very much became aware of is duty of care for the audience with this piece, because it was a piece that was about parent-child relationship, cancer, terminal cancer, and there was an element of domestic abuse in there, and actually the effect that it had on, in terms of abusive relationship between the father and the mother, and that just had a really strong effect on people in this kind of immersive environment. And so we looked very closely at how we looked after people when they came out of the experience, and made sure they were aware of what they're going into beforehand. In this environment as well, it's you know, it's a really good reminder that co-production and collaboration is so important in the development of new forms. And for us, you know, the theatre company working with a film company it feels like a sensible thing to do, but actually you also need to remember that collaborations very typically need additional room to breathe, and you need to take time to understand the different cultures of different industries and different organisations. You know, there was the way contracts and rights work in the film industry is not the same as it is in theatre, and so you find yourself creating hybrid types of contract and agreement, and those need to be thought about and set up properly. These slides were some behind the scenes slides, but I'm going to just shift over them if that's okay. That was actually the door. You see a full front door in the VR, but in real life it's just a tiny strip of wood, because you need to take account of where the lighthouses can see. If I've got time, I'll explain why there's a slide full of aluminium foil. But it's, you know, the intricacies of getting a piece of work out to a live audience are just as complex in this type of scenario. And then one of the more recent pieces that we did was All Kinds of Limbo, which is a VR musical journey in which the audience member, well, an audience of up to 20 people go to a physical space and put on a VR headset, and in the physical space is then mapped to, well, we have a virtual space mapped to a physical space, and you are in an immersive performance. So Nubia Brandon, who's the performer that you can see here, she is volumetrically captured and then placed in a digitally staged environment, and you have a performance from her to a musical score developed by Rafi Bushman and performed by him and the New Shape Orchestra. But in effect, what is happening is you're on stage in a kind of promenade virtual reality musical theatre performance. There were 7 scene changes, 4 costume changes, and what happens is the performance moves around the space. So the audience, it's not like a seated experience. You go and you sit in one space. You very much find the performance as it moves around the space. And you know, the couple of things in this for me, one was balancing creative ambitions and technical or staging ambitions. There is the context of what this content was, which is very important, and we needed to, wanted to and needed to make a piece that celebrated multicultural Britain. it was matched to a show at the point in time that was on stage called Small Island, which very looks at the kind of what is now, well, it was a precursor to what is now the Windows generation in the UK. But also alongside that, what I was aware of is that I wanted to create a communal musical VR performance with hopefully I'm back in. Back to slides. If someone could send me a WhatsApp message just to know that I'm back in, that would be great. So we had two briefs in this. One was the creative brief, and one was the technical brief. Thanks for the message. And a really interesting thing here was this actually, what this started out of was one of 12 ideas, and then we slowly whittled it down to this idea. But this idea also wasn't this idea when it started, and how we went from the original idea to what it is happened over a period of time. And it's really important, as in any creative evolution process, the start idea versus the end idea can be quite different. But in something like this, where it's a completely new form, the difference can be completely, radically different, and that's okay. It's very much, again, going through an experience of finding the right form, which I think that we did here. And this was, for me, was, go for what you believe in, because a number of people were saying you're not going to be able to have 20 people walking around a space with VR headsets in, because they're all going to bump into each other. And I didn't think that was right, because if we got the scenario right, people aren't wandering in random directions all around the space, and therefore leads you around a space. And there's discussions about avatars, which we have in there for the different audience members. But in a sense, what happens is the performance also acts as a choreographical cue for the audience. And if you're stood outside the experience, you can tell what part of the audience is in, because they're either looking over there, or they're all stood in a circle, they're looking over there. And so, as I had thought, the performance is the thing that drives the audience's behaviour, and therefore that you can rely on that, rather than assuming people are just going to be walking in random directions. National Theatre at Home stands for 2020, which is a number of things that happen for the main organisation, a lot of really positive things, of which there's not enough time to go into that. But I think what was important is, the theatre industry took, as did many, horrendous knocking last year, and we were a completely different, smaller organisation due to that. And the freelance community desperately needs to be supported in a way that's just not happening. But the thing that did happen, and I'm not trying to make light of a bad situation, but the thing that did happen is that lockdown was a catalyst for new and ongoing discussions. So things that we talked about for a period of time all of a sudden were coming to the fore, and new ideas were coming in. And you very much saw an environment where culture was responding to change in a very innovative way. The National Theatre at Home work that we did initially, which was free on YouTube, was seen by more than 10 million views. And according to the stage, the streaming figures equated to all three of the theatre spaces being completely filled for 11 years. That's an incredible achievement's not the right word, but it's an incredible phenomenon. And actually, what it very much has done for me, and for obviously a lot of people in the organisation, is just recognise how important that home market is. And I very much talk about the living room being a distance remote performance space now in a way that I wasn't doing in 2019. And what we need to do is not treat that unique phenomenon as a COVID-only scenario. It's actually really, really recognising the place that we as cultural institutions can have in people's own homes. And the final, most recent project was specifically created during and for lockdown. I think it was about April. A storyteller called Madame Kalamazoo got in touch with us because she had an idea where she was going to be able to deliver customized stories to children and families in lockdown. And what happens is the parent or guardian will go onto the Madame Kalamazoo website, and they will tell Madame Kalamazoo the names of their children, after which the parent will start to receive customized stories, 19 stories, which can come through daily or can come through at weekends. But the key part of this is that the central characters are actually the names of the children in the household. And in effect, the house becomes the stage and the children become the performers, and it's a script. The story that comes through, it's told through a script. And so they perform that story and are central to it. And there are tasks, creative things in there. There's mindfulness in there. They share their experiences with other people, with other families in lockdown through a place called the Whale World. And it, again, it's miles away from virtual reality, but in terms of immersive storytelling, it's very, very significantly a piece of immersive storytelling. So again, it's just interesting to see how artists and culture kind of respond to these different types of experience and learn from it, and art and storytelling adapts as we move forward. So I think that is it in terms of me just talking to you guys, and hopefully now we're going to open up to a wider conversation. And apologies for dropping out in the middle there. I don't know what happened, but thanks to Zoom. Do you want to move straight back in?
Thanks for that, Toby. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know via the chat, but I'll just start off by asking you a couple of questions. So first of all, because you ended up talking a lot about the pandemic and how you've reacted to that. And I suppose with all kinds of Limbo, I experienced that at the National Theatre, but also when you showed it at IDFA, which was an interesting kind of an experiment, I suppose, in mixing up a live audience in Amsterdam together with a virtual audience wherever they were in the world to experience that together. And I have to say that I found that experience very enriching, and probably just somehow more, maybe it was because of the lockdown, I felt that opportunity to share that experience with people in Amsterdam at the same time was incredibly valuable to me. It was one of my, the best moments of the festival for me for that reason, because it kind of broke down all the barriers. So I suppose my question is, it's twofold. One is, when do you think, when are you planning for us to be able to have location-based experiences again in a venue, physical venue with shared equipment? And then I suppose another part of that is, have you learned stuff out of the pandemic about the way audiences behave, or the opportunity to connect with audiences that might make you think slightly differently about how to configure those location-based experiences?
Yes, very interesting questions. Also, just to say, I realise that I've gone on for slightly more than half an hour. I'm more than happy to stay for another half an hour or 45 minutes, whatever, however long you want to run this part of it. So that was, the presentation at IDFA was an experiment as part of a roadmap of things moving forward, and there were a number of things being tested there. One was just the concept of having an in-venue audience and a remote audience, or actually even taking out the in-venue audience, just having a distributed audience experiencing the piece of performance, is something that we're very much working heavily on. And but that actual ability to bring the live and the in-venue audience together over a simple Zoom, both in Zoom and in the VR world. So Ben, who was running the show, who's the host, he noticed that audience members were high-fiving each other in the performance space before the performance started. And, like, okay, so what's happening is we've got somebody in Korea high-fiving somebody in New York in a performance space, and that performance allows a sense of community and social that didn't exist between those two people otherwise. And that's an incredibly inspiring thing to see. And just actually delivering the performance itself to a remote audience is one thing, but actually seeing the communal audience being able to be recreated for people in isolation has a very strong potential, I think. And it goes, one of the things actually for all kinds of Limbo, the reason that I wanted to have a multiple audience do it is because I really think, in the same way that when you Google image search VR, you just get headsets, a perception of VR is that it's an individual person in a headset. And I felt, as a kind of performance-based organization, we need to move audiences' expectations beyond that and do what we can to create a communal experience. So first of all, doing that in venue is really great, and then actually doing it remotely is also great, because it starts allowing people to see beyond the restrictions of their own expectations. So I think it did definitely change the way that we saw audiences interacting. We didn't necessarily think there was going to be that level of interaction between them. We knew they would be able to acknowledge people from different places, and there were people from around the world, but not actually an interaction with them. And also, even in the Zoom before or after, just seeing the people on camera waving to the people in venue, again, created like a kind of pre-show, post-show type of vibe kind of thing. So people do respond well, I think, to that cultural proposition in a way that we'd previously only thought you could do in venue, but that seems to not be the case. It goes beyond that. And so we will most definitely be taking that into learning in terms of future location-based work. Well, sorry, future communal XR work. In terms of when we plan to get into venue, at the moment we're not planning to get into venue, just because last year we should have been taking all kinds of Limbo on tour, and that obviously didn't happen. And so we've pivoted a bit. And also what was interesting, both in IDFA but also in London Film Festival, where we showed it as an individual experience, actually, we created it as an experience for people to come together, but actually letting it out into the world so people can see it in their own homes increases the access to it, which is what we really, really want to do. So until we know we're safely back in venues properly, that's when we'll start planning again. We have got plans for later this year, but it's as with all things at the moment, there's a plan A and there's a plan B. So what we're not doing is being reliant or dependent on being in venue on a particular date and time. We know when we hope to be, but we're also doing multiple strands of work so that we can be flexible to the current environment.
Do you think that a location-based experience that would tour, I suppose, as an installation or a kind of a theatre piece, in a way, would be almost like a different genre from that kind of completely distributed, more kind of social VR kind of theatrical experience? Or do you think that actually it could be a hybrid that that people that is an installation somewhere, but people could also participate remotely in that?
I think it's probably a combination of both, and I think there's things that we're yet to learn in answer to that question that we've not yet learned, and so we need to be careful not to restrict the evolution of the form by what we in January 2021 see it being. And also there's parallels in, we have, you know, the National Theatre tours work, but it also transfers work and it broadcasts work, you know, all derived from the stage on the South Bank in London. So there's a number of parallels there. I think, you know, but there is a world where you could transfer all kinds of Limbo to a musical venue in the States, for example, and they broadcast out from there, as well as having people in venue. But the in-venue and remote audiences can definitely coexist, if I've understood the question correctly.
Yeah. Can I ask you what happens at the immersive storytelling studio? I mean, I've been there, obviously, and I've seen how artists are constantly flooding in and out. And it's the actual location is the NT studio, where all of the shows in the National Theatre are basically developed, right? So can you sort of describe a little bit about the different artists who come in and out and what the process is for creating work there?
Yeah, there's no set process. In effect, it's a learning space for everyone that comes into it. But what happens is we bring storytellers in. So they could be writers, directors, performers, choreographers, designers, and we, in a sense, acclimatise them to the opportunities that are available with immersive technologies. Not all of them new, actually. When we showed all kinds of Limbo, we had the communal VR experience at one end of the space, and at the other end of the space, we had a Victorian theatre trick called Pepper's Ghost, which has been used quite significantly in the music industry in the past few years in terms of bringing holograms on stage. So it's very interesting to show a Victorian theatre trick next to, you know, communal VR. So we bring in artists, and they could be coming in with a sense of, I have no understanding of this, but I get it's really exciting and I'd like to understand more, to people who have some sense, or maybe have a story they've been trying to tell for a number of years but haven't been able to find the right form for it, and come in and say, you know, which we you know, there's been a number of occasions like that. And what happens is you have your creative team, but now part of the, what I would call new creative team, you have the role of a creative technologist in there. And that's the really kind of important update to the practice of theatre in this area. And for me, the creative technologist is somebody who understands the art as much as they understand the technology, in such that there's a very symbiotic relationship that happens there. And that allows, I mean, you see it from both sides. You're just like, the storytellers are like, wow, I didn't think that you could do that with the tech. Whereas we're just like, well, actually, that's quite easy to do with the tech. But at the same time, the people who know the tech are like, oh my God, didn't think that you could conceive the use of the technology in such a way. And so actually, in a sense, it's about enabling the storytellers to tell stories in new ways. But it's very much a symbiotic relationship, and it's a devised process in a way. You know, it's rare that somebody comes in with a finished script and says, let's go make this into a piece of VR. It's much more, as is the nature of the main NT studio, which you referred to, which is it's an iterative process of developing new work. So in the building that we are adjacent to, you know, 2 years before there was a script for Warhorse, there were performers walking around with cardboard horses' heads on and ladders between them to test whether it is actually possible to get an emotional encounter out of a puppeted horse. And it turns out, yes, it is. But you know, we're very privileged to have that space to practice those things. That's a very long-winded answer to your question. But I think the thing is, there aren't set rules. We just know it's an environment for exploration, and the story and the audience experience are the leading things that inform what we do there.
One of our lab participants, Varna, has a question for you. Varna, would you like to step forward?
Hi, Toby. Thanks so much for a lot of inspiration. I noticed in your talk that you've been experimenting with many kinds of different, ways to incorporate new technology and new mediums into the theatrical world. And I was thinking that augmented reality could, possibly have a huge potential in two ways. One would be to be in a theater space and somehow, the audience would see some kind of augmented layer to the physical layer. Or in another way, we would be in our homes, for example, and we could create theatrical pieces somehow in our own personal environments, bring the actors to our homes. And I was just wondering if you, who've been experimenting with a lot of different new media technologies over the years, have you ever thought or have you ever worked on augmented reality and theater somehow together?
Yes, and thank you for the question. And I kind of got every other word, unfortunately. Sorry, my internet went a bit hokey as you're asking the question, but I think I've got the gist of it. Most definitely, the potential of augmented reality is hugely significant for theatre and for storytelling. I think there's a very interesting conversation to be had around what is augmented reality and what is mixed reality. My own belief is that the work that we do is actually fits more around mixed reality, but that's academic point, I guess. I think I think it's a really strong area of exploitation, and were you to be led by the technical conversation, everyone's predicting that AR is going to be bigger than VR, but I think we as cultural organisations don't need to be distracted by that. It's finding the right form for a piece of work, and I think you will definitely see storytellers really considering how their work can be presented, both in home settings or settings that aren't a traditional stage. And actually quite often find myself talking about the venue of the future as well. What happens when you bring artists into a studio like ours is that very often they're not creating work for a proscenium arch or a traditional theatre space. They're coming up with ideas that sit outside that. And when you bring AR into it as well, then that stretches even further. But yes, it's a very, very interesting area of development. And yeah, I would think would be, CPH Docs Lab would be a place that that's rife to explore.
We've got a couple of other questions from lab participants. Carol, would you like to step forward, please?
Hi, I don't know if you can see me. Am I there?
We can. You're there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been so fascinating, and I really loved all kinds of Limbo. I was able to see it with an audience in person, and I had to go see it a couple times. And listening to you talk about designing your piece where you had someone tucked into bed. And my question is, what were some of your experiences with designing for intimacy with an audience? Like, did you have some pitfalls where perhaps one motion, like being tucked into bed, was joyous for some, but frightening for somebody else? So basically we're combining people with through different forms, and the walls are broken down in different ways. So I'm just wondering what your experience has been, if you could describe maybe some of that for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's a really great question. Thank you very much indeed. I slightly resist the idea that we were designing an experience, designing the engagement. Although I guess that's probably a completely fine way of talking about it. It was very much that it came out of the storytelling. So it definitely wasn't. We didn't want a point at which we did something like took somebody into bed. That came out of the story that Jordan was telling. And thank you also for bringing me back to that piece, that point in time, because it talks about it being a bittersweet point. I mean, for most people, it was an incredibly, well, actually, it was just an incredibly joyful experience. And the next thing that happens after you've been tucked into bed, and then mum sings a little bit of a song with you again, and then she gets up and walks off. And we literally have people, grown adults, after 5 minutes of this experience, sitting up and holding their arms out and like, mum, don't go, mum, don't go. So the intensity of the relationship is really significant. But one of the things in Tribeca that when we were learning how significant the emotional experience was for audiences, you'd have people that would want to talk afterwards. You'd have people that would go away and then come back and want to talk. Some people may be just slightly broken and just need time on their own. We also have people that came back and said, "Oh, I found my mum straight after doing Draw Me Close," or "I'm going to go and visit my mum this weekend," which they haven't been planning to do. So it's great to have that kind of effect. But one of the questions that I asked people as they were coming out of the experience, as I thought to be a bit of an icebreaker, was, when was the last time you were tucked into bed? As a kind of slightly jokey question, just to test the water of how they were feeling. And not loads, but there were a few all men who said, "I was never tucked into bed at school. I was never tucked into bed as a child." And that was just another level of kind of heartbreak for us and for that particular person, if you like. But I think what you can't necessarily do as storytellers is shy away from, duty of care is a really good term, I think, because it comes from both sides, in that you've got to look after your audience, but at the same time, you are not being, your role there isn't to protect them from something, if that makes sense. So it's just that right balance. But you can really see that in the wrong hands. I've got the opportunity to give audiences an experience that I would say isn't ethically right to do. So it's very much about the artist being responsible. I'm not going in for the quick win or tearjerker or all those kind of things. It's a very new opportunity for very nuanced storytelling, and it should be treated with a lot of kind of care and respect, as you also treat your audience like that as well. I'm going to go away and think about the designing the engagement, because I think, as I was saying, it wasn't an intentional thing; it came out of it. But there is probably also an interest in. Well, I'd be careful about being led too much by designing the interaction. I think again, it's form from content rather than the other way around. Sorry, I'm not in any way kind of disagreeing with your question. You've just thrown me a deep thought, which is.
Greg and Rose have got a couple of questions, I suppose, about producing in a pandemic and the difficulties that throws up. Would you like to join us, Greg and Rose?
Okay, hello, hey. Yeah, thanks for that talk. That was really, really interesting and inspiring. A couple of things, couple of questions, yeah, like Mark says. One was more about the notion of this staging of the content being as important as the content itself is something that kind of our team was looking really forward to staging something physical in CPH docs. And I think that's obviously changed quite considerably now about it being predominantly online. And I just wonder, like, I know you mentioned about the Kalamazoo storyteller, about this other worlding, and I just kind of wondering if there's any other like tips or takeaways about how we create these other worlds and other contexts where you don't have the stage, as it were, like the physical stage that you can have full control over. Like, I think there's an element of control, and then there's the second question, but maybe you can answer this one first. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it is tricky. You've in a sense, you have lost control or lost complete control, and actually there's a balance between trying to keep control versus designing something that has the flexibility to exist in a completely different way, and it depends on what the audience decides to do with it. So what you're it's a really interesting question. I'm just trying to think the best way to think about it. I mean, augmented reality is coming to mind in that you know, if that's the way that you're bringing a performer into a space, for example, into someone's home, then it's what you're not doing necessarily, I would say, is wanting to present the whole set in such a way that it becomes obstructive for you to see the performer. It's actually the presence of the footfall that the performer uses, as well as some ephemeral elements outside, that start to become the thing that you focus on. I mean, the interesting thing with augmented reality as well, though, is increasingly the ability for devices to recognize the shape of the environment that it's in. So we actually did a test for Wonderland with some mixed reality glasses, whereby there was a desk, and you once you had the glasses on, the headset recognized the screen, and then Wonderland fell out of the screen onto the person's desk. Now, obviously, you can take that principle and apply that in a number of different ways. So I guess in a way, it's almost like, this is not the right answer at all, but it's just like, if, for example, it was a period drama, it's going to be the costume and the performance that helps convey to the audience that this is a costume period piece, rather than the stately homes and the horse and carts and all that kind of stuff. It's working out which key elements need to deliver the message that you want, but in a sense it is quite tricky. You've definitely lost the control of a more usual staged environment. I'm sorry, I'd love to talk more about that with you, but I think I would, at the moment, I'm just likely to ramble on, but happy to think more and chat later.
And Greg, do you want to ask the second half of your question?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that answer. That was really, really useful. The other one is actually more just on practical terms, because I think it was something that you mentioned about you allowing or asking for more space and time when you're I guess exploring, like you say, like actually turning to look and learn and test and experiment with it. And how do you ask for that from like your funders or project managers or like the venues and stuff? Like I know you mentioned earlier with the horses, you've got ladders and stuff. And I guess, like, you know, really practical terms, like, and it's way later down my career, but in the sense of like, yeah, how do you go like, hey, what we need is 5 weeks rather than the normal 2 weeks of R&D in this space, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I need to start by saying I'm incredibly lucky working at the National Theatre, which is itself a very innovative organisation that is artist-led, and it's a producing theatre, so its mission is to keep making new work all the time. And the fact that the studio exists as a space where warhorse can be, workshopped years in advance, is not the norm, as it were, to have such a resource. That we're very lucky to have that. So it's for me, we exist to have that extra time and to develop a new form in terms of the immersive storytelling studio. I think in terms of what you're saying about like how do you ask for that extra time, like for a funder, for example, for me that's quite easy. Well, it's not easy. It's an easy answer in that it needs to be the right funder that understands what you are doing. So it needs to be a funder who's comfortable with innovation and developing new forms of work. So what you might get, this isn't going, you're not asking for a commission for a TV series, let's say, for example, because people know what a TV series looks like and what a schedule for developing a TV series looks like. That doesn't necessarily change from one project to the next. It's the content of it which does, whereas you're actually developing new forms. So in this case, you wouldn't go to a TV series funder, you go to somebody who is more adept at looking at those kind of forms of innovation. And actually, to be fair, I'm not in any way dissing people who fund TV series, not at all. And quite the contrary, the people that do fund that thing are starting to fund more and more immersive types of work and VR and XR. And with that, they're also they are also learning what it needs to develop that type of work. So yeah, I think it's finding the right type of funder. It's about finding the right type of partners, whether they're individual producers or organizations. That for me is the key, I think, to being able to find yourself in the right environment. But it's slightly tricky for me in a way, because I don't face the challenges that a lot of people face, which is asking for more money, for more time, for something that it has less concrete outcomes, as it were. And just to be clear, we haven't got lots of money. That's the money is the resource of me and other people working in the studio. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Toby. That was fantastic. Thanks to the lab participants. And so Toby and everyone watching on Facebook, I hope you'll come to CPH Docs and experience the lab projects when they're finished in April. And for now, I'd like to say thanks again, and we'll be signing off.